All right, my man. It's a pleasure to have you on the show today. Thank you so much for coming on to the Entrepreneur Fitness Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So, Ari, I really wanted to have you on because I've seen what you've been doing with the less doing more living podcast and your book and everything, man. And it's just the perfect system you're setting up for the entrepreneur who is just living in a world of overwhelm and is constantly being hit by tons of stimulus and is really reacting in life versus like setting up proactive systems where they can manage it and be more effective. And so I really wanted to pick your brain today and kind of gift to my audience all this awesome knowledge you have about systemizing these kind of things, allowing people to get out of overwhelm and become more effective entrepreneurs.
That's right in my wheelhouse.
Awesome, dude. Is there anything I missed that you want to tell the audience about introducing yourself?
No, I'm sure it'll come out while we're doing talking.
Awesome. So, as I told my audience in your introduction, you overcame the incurable Crohn's disease by kind of hacking your health, and all the research tells us lately that stress is one of the most common precursors to any chronic disease or illness we have. And so, where did you begin when you were trying to overcome Crohn's disease? Like, can you kind of tell me where you started to overcome this whole thing?
Yeah, sure. So, as with a lot of sort of traumatic events in people's lives, I guess, whether it's a death in the family or an illness or a bankruptcy, there's all sorts of things that count as trauma, of course. I feel like that you have a choice at that point where you can either go with the flow in a very bad way, or you can say, I basically have nothing to lose. I might as well try something different. So in my case, I had a lot of it going with the flow, and I was getting worse and worse and worse. And one particularly bad night in the hospital, it wasn't so much an epiphany, it was just more a realization that this wasn't working and that I had to break out of the automatic in a way. So the first thing I did was looked at all the data that I had, because without even sort of realizing it, I had amassed an enormous amount of data in terms of blood tests and other, I had so many tests done at that point, and I had blood tests every 5 weeks, so I had all this data, and I started to correlate stuff and put, and the truth is, in retrospect, I may not have actually found anything useful out of that data, but at the time, it gave me a little sense of control. And that's a big issue with stress in general, but with chronic inflammation or chronic illness, excuse me, I'm just finishing up the end of a cold, is this lack of control. And that leads to stress because you're at war with your own body, right? So that's tough. And I started looking at the data and I started to try things. And honestly, that lasted a couple of weeks, I think. But then I was like, I really need to go hardcore. So I changed everything. Basically, I was 35 to 34 pounds overweight, or heavier than I think I'm about 40. I was about 40 pounds heavier than I am now. And I was eating not very well, and I was not exercising, and I was not taking supplements, and I had a bad mindset, honestly. So I started with changing the diet, and the easiest thing to do at that point was I'm going to go vegan. So I went vegan for a month, which was not an especially pleasant experience, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend that for somebody who has an inflammatory condition. So I became a sort of standard vegetarian for about 6 months after that. And the thing about that was interesting was that my doctor at one point when I had an obstructive episode believed that it was the result of having, I think, an iceberg lettuce salad. That was the kicker for him. And the reasoning was sound, but it didn't make sense overall to me. But the result was that I was afraid of greens for such a long time. I wouldn't eat greens. I wouldn't touch greens. And I was like, what do I have to lose? So I went hardcore the other way and started eating pounds and pounds of vegetables and hearty grains like quinoa and millet and wheat berry and bulgur and that kind of stuff. Because basically what I believed, and whether or not this is substantiated, I believed that my digestive system was a muscle that had become weak and flabby and unused, and I decided I had to kick its ass into shape. So in the same time that I'm doing all this, I started exercising a little bit more. I was using the Wii Fit, believe it or not. And the Wii Fit, honestly, I have to say, is like an amazing way to get yourself back on the horse if it's been a long time. Because you can do it yourself. It really marks your progress very well. It's actually a decent workout if you're not in good shape, and it builds with you. It was amazing. But within about a month or so, I was like to the limits of what the Wii Fit could do. So I decided to go really hardcore, and I went with the Insanity program, which, if anybody knows P90X, it's a little more popular. The Insanity program is like the all cardio, all body weight version. It's a 60-day program, DVD based, and I mean, it nearly killed me, I feel like, but in 60 days I lost 24 pounds after finally doing it. And I was really starting to feel good, and I'm starting to have, the thing is exercise is such a keystone habit for fixing so many other things. And once I started that, I started drinking smoothies. I never had smoothies before, like healthy smoothies, not peanut butter, banana, moo cow smoothies. And I started thinking like, oh, what supplements can I try? What's this going to do for my workout? Things that I'd never thought about before. And it sort of went from there. But the most important thing is that I got into triathlon. I started training I did my first triathlon a few months after I got off my meds. And then I started training for Ironman France. And along the way, Ironman training is hard on anybody's body, whether you're sick or not. And I was still probably kind of sick in some ways because there is healing that needed to take place. I realized that the fitness and the supplements and the the fitness supplements and the nutrition aspects were, in retrospect, fairly easy to figure out. And I've replicated my results in over 24 people with Crohn's at this point.
Wow.
The hard part was the stress. So stress is great in small doses at the right time and place, but it's really bad when it becomes chronic and when you, again, lose that control. So my response to the stress issue was to come up with this new system of productivity, which I would call less doing, as in less doing, more living. And the goal was to help people free up their time, reclaim their minds, and do the things that they want to do. And to do that, I created this framework of optimizing, automating, and outsourcing everything in your life, including your health, in order to be more effective. And that's really where everything started.
That's awesome, man. So are you the guy who's using Instacart, or I don't know, do you have Instacart where you are?
Yes. Yeah, we do. I don't use it, but I love it as a concept, and I probably would use it. Actually, now that they've added Costco, I will definitely be using it.
Yeah. And so what would you say are some of the 80-20s in regards to tools that you use to de-stress and allow yourself to do the things that you actually enjoy doing?
So probably the number one tool is Evernote, honestly. So Evernote, for those who don't know, is a note-taking application. It syncs across every device. You can take notes in the form of text or audio or video or websites, whatever you want. People come to me every day and they tell me that they're overwhelmed. That's the word I hear all day long, is that they're overwhelmed. And that comes from a lot of things, but we have all these different responsibilities in our life, right? We have so many things that are pulling on our attention. And that's frustrating in some ways, and people tend to just kind of put their head down like a football player and just rush through it and just try to get through. But the problem is that we just don't have that capacity. So the human brain is great for coming up with ideas. It's terrible for holding on to them and probably executing on them. So the idea with something like Evernote, and with a lot of the things that I recommend, is to actually overuse them. So if my feeling is that if you have an idea in your head, you need to get that idea out of your head. It's that simple. As quickly and as unbiased way as possible. Don't judge it. Don't think about it. You cannot know if it's a good or bad idea. Maybe you can, but you really can't. You can't possibly know if the idea is relevant. There is no way for you to know if an idea that you have today is going to be relevant in the next 10 years, 15 years, 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. So get that idea out of your head, and it doesn't matter if they're good or bad. And the point is that ideas need flow. You try to hold on to everything, it just creates backup, and it's going to come out of your pores. Like, it just doesn't work. So you need to write those ideas down, and all your thoughts and everything. And it's what I call creating the external brain. So if you write down 10 ideas, 9 of them may be terrible, but they might add up to a good idea that makes the 10th one, or they simply get out of the way of the 10th idea. So you get into this flow state, ironically. It's a flow state where you're constantly moving ideas through your head. And what that leads to is creating more ideas. You get to free up that mind space, that head space, so that you can do the things you want to do and think of the things that you want to do, which you might not even realize before. So much of what prevents people from getting those great ideas out, and I believe that everybody on the planet has some genius in them, that 5% that makes them unique in terms of what they can do and what they should do. But it's that 95% that really gets in the way of them getting out there or acting on it.
Yeah. So, all right, I'm curious, man, does it work the opposite way? So, like, you're talking about coming up with, writing down everything that comes in your mind so you can pick out that one idea maybe that actually will amount to something that you can move forward on. What about going the other way and, like, a lot of times we come up with all of these thoughts and worries that come in our mind. Do you do the same thing and, like, okay, maybe write down something that's bothering you and just look at it, and so maybe you can get clear and see it for what it is and maybe not worse than it is?
So one of the concepts that I really train people in a lot is what I call creating the manual of you. Okay, so every one of us goes through a process on a regular basis, and processes, ideas, whatever it may be. We go through these processes. But we have these two systems of our brain, as was really well laid out by Daniel Kahneman in his book, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. We have system 1, system 2. So system 1 is really the automatic thing. And there's a place for it. That's a good thing, except that a lot of things tend to get automatic in our minds, and we tend to do them without actually really thinking about them. So the problem with that is the standard, this is how we've been doing it for years, why would we change now? It's like, well, because there's a new way to do it. First of all, you're probably completely disconnected from the process. And, oh, by the way, you probably don't have to do that at all anymore. So if you stop, this is the thing, and what you're sort of alluding to, is like you stop and you look at what you're actually doing and write down the steps. And it's important to write them down. Not by hand, but just writing them out. Because screencasts to me are kind of like a cop-out when it comes to really identifying processes. So if you have to write it out in a way that, first of all, you can look at it and say, well, step 7 and 8 doesn't really make sense, and I guess there's a hole between 14 and 15 that I got to fill out. And you do that, and so that's the optimization aspect of my sort of framework. But then you look at how you can automate things. So you look at that right away, and you're like, well, that can be done by a robot. That can be done by Dropbox. That can be done by Evernote, IFTTT, Zapier, all these things. Or that can be done by a person that I don't have to talk to or think about. I just put this in place. But automation is really about set it and forget it. So it's the operations you can put in place that you don't have to think about ever again. Then, if there's anything left over, and a lot of times there isn't, that's when you look at outsourcing it to specialists or generalists. But I'm finding every day there's more and more ways that you can automate things without any human involvement at all.
Yeah. In a lot of ways, you talk about not human involvement. Are a lot of things, do you use virtual assistants very often? Are those also, something you do to help automate?
Yes, that would be more on the outsourcing side.
Yeah.
But I use thousands of virtual assistants.
Wow. Jesus, man. Something else, I love where you're going. I love where this conversation is going, because this is so valuable to anyone, because not many people actually, like I definitely don't, write down, maybe like your daily routine or a daily task that you have to go through and systemize and see if there are gaps. And also, going through this process of whatever we do, I'm really curious, what do you do, or maybe what do you tell some clients that you work with to get them to really slow down and enjoy the process of doing what they love, instead of trying to speed from one thing to the next thing to the next, just getting things, done versus enjoying it, which is what they should be doing when it gets to a point of automation, because they should only be doing what they enjoy doing, right? Enjoy doing.
I don't actually put it that way, because if you just do what you enjoy doing, a lot of people will probably just stay in bed all day, or maybe have a lot of sex. But that's actually not what a lot of people really want. There's a really great study. I think Malcolm Gladwell had this in one of his books about this guy who was a food product designer person whatever. He came up with like chunky ragu sauce. But basically what it was is that most Americans apparently believe that when it comes to coffee, they like a rich, hearty roasted blend of coffee with blah, blah, blah. But the truth is that when they actually test it, most Americans like weak, milky coffee. So, which is funny. I like black coffee, but I don't ever think of like the rich, hearty. But it's what we've been sort of trained to do. It's like that, device. Sure. So the things that it's like, I'd love to be like kite surfing all day long. Unless you're going to be a pro, that's probably not what you actually want to be doing, and it would get boring very quickly. Which, a lot of people who end up taking a year sabbatical to travel the world, I forget where I read this, but a lot of them end up like not doing it for a whole year. They end up coming back to like reality, because that's not reality. Reality is my dog right here, and my 3 kids, and my wife, and like a house that I have to take care of, and things that I have to do. What do I really enjoy doing? I enjoy my work. I love the work that I do. I love this kind of interaction. So it's more about freeing up that headspace so that you can discover the things that you're good at and that you actually have to offer. And I haven't seen a situation where that didn't align very well with what that person enjoyed doing.
Yeah. And I guess definitely, I mean, the enjoyment comes in like that challenge or that constant struggle or the hero's journey of like, constant. I guess that's the difference is like when you're automating things well, you can really constantly work on overcoming things and constantly achieving and overcoming challenges versus getting caught up in things where you're not making progress and you're spending too much time doing things that are pulling you away from moving forward where you want to go.
Exactly.
That's great. So you said, I love the book, Thinking Fast and Slow too. And so that's a book, I'm sure you mentioned this, you must be a big fan. Something I like to talk about people about is how we brought up a lot of those studies where people, for example, that one study where they had students, I guess, reading words that had to do with the elderly and then walking from one room to the next, and they would walk slower.
It's all slower.
Yeah. And so I thought that was crazy, man. And just thinking about like, unconsciously how that affects our mind in like everyday life. Do you kind of try to avoid different stimulus that may have that kind of reaction or that kind of effect on you in the same way, reading things like about elderly, but like for me, like I don't want to be around energy or like that isn't productive because I feel like it kind of slows me down unconsciously, even if it isn't on a conscious level.
That's an interesting way to think about it. If you think about the like environmental factors, actually something that you should avoid is things that might make you act older or slower. I don't, and I think what I do is I try to surround myself with as much positive and energizing stimuli as possible. A lot of that is internal, honestly. Like the internal voice, the self-talk that takes place, a lot of that is around getting motivated and getting things done. This morning, so first of all, you're not catching me. I do interviews like this on my work days, and my official work days are Mondays and Wednesdays. I don't have any other official work days. I work other times, but these are the times when I'm scheduled meetings and I take my time to really focus on the things that I'm working on, or I'll get writing done. So I think that it's a lot of it is about cycling, and it's cycling, and I'll explain what I mean. That comes with diet, with travel, with relationships, like all sorts of things that I think require cycling, and the fact that you can't just do the same thing over and over and not expect your body, your mind, your tastes and desires not to change at all. So, for instance, so Mondays and Wednesdays are very focused days, and I kind of will do, I will, like just having an interview with someone like you, it's energizing to me. Like I like talking about this stuff, I enjoy that. But the other days when I focus more on my kids and my wife and house chores and stuff like that, there may be some more negative stimuli, something not from my family, but other things that just sort of may come in there, or I may get pissed off at somebody on the road while I'm driving, although that doesn't happen as much anymore, fortunately. But I honestly think that I require that. I think if every day was perfect, maybe it would get boring and maybe it would lose its effect. So especially as an entrepreneur who works for himself, or him or herself, or freelancers, where you really don't have that accountability factor. When I know that the rest of the week is really unstructured for me, and a lot of people find it very difficult, but then I go into a super structured mode on Monday and Wednesday, I just dive in and I get so much done. But I don't think that if I was doing that 5 days a week or 7 days a week, that it would work.
I like that, man. I like the idea of cycling. I mean, I feel like everything in life is cycling. We go through these seasons of life that kind of cycle through. We go through we go through cycles of motivation where we see potential, and then we take action based off that potential and the results we see, and that resonates really strong with me. So, like, what are some of the other examples of like cycles that you've set up in your life? You talked about like nutrition, is exercise. Like, what other cycles do you get yourself into to optimize performance?
Well, nutrition is a big one. So I'm pretty much. I'm not quite ketogenic, but for most of the summer, for most of the winter, I do intermittent fasting. Mm-hmm. So I'll skip breakfast, and in the winter we sort of get in that hibernate mode, and I just find that works really well for me. However, in the summer months, or even now, and it's still pretty warm, if I try to do intermittent fasting, I end up getting really tired at the end of the day. And I haven't exactly figured out why that is. I know that there's some reasoning behind it. I know that that's not an uncommon experience, but it makes sense. Like, if you think about evolution, why we would fast more in the winter when it was harder to find food and all that stuff. Sure. So that's one thing. This is like so taboo in the community, in like the health community, but I love to have a big bowl of pasta probably once a month.
Yeah.
And gluten being the devil and all that it is, I process carbs very well. Sometimes I crave a bowl of pasta, and when I do, I don't deny that craving, and I enjoy it, and it's good. And then I, go back and I think if you make homemade pasta with olive oil and salt and pepper and a little Romano cheese, like, it's kind of amazing. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. But even like the Bulletproof diet, which is pretty hard, I mean, it's very hardcore, but he'll have you cycle in and out of ketosis. It's just one of those things, like, our bodies just need that change. I think that unpredictability is very important for any kind of growth, really. So that's one, but work as well. So I change my work schedule sort of quite often. The Monday, Wednesday thing is relatively new. Over the summer, it changed a couple times, but like in August, for instance, I didn't have any specific work day because there was no school, kids are home, there was a lot of things going on, and I kind of worked when I could, which was honestly a little stressful at times, but I got some really good work done because, if I had 1 hour to get things done, I was really getting stuff done. So that'll change as well. The work cycle. I'm trying to think of another example. Sleeping as well. I've gone through several phases where I felt like biphasic sleeping, where I'll go to sleep a little earlier, maybe 9 o'clock or so, and then wake up sort of naturally. I'll wake up around 2 for like an hour, and then go back to sleep. Really, really works well for me. And then other times I can go to sleep at 11 o'clock and wake up at 5 in the morning and be great. So I have found that and that a lot of people would say that doesn't make sense, but I've seen that it works very well for me.
That's what it's about. I mean, that's kind of my whole philosophy around like nutrition, exercise, and training and optimizing is like not everyone can just plug into a specific type of diet or a routine because everything has to be personalized. We're all different, unique human beings, and
right.
Different things work for other people. I mean, I have some, clients I work with, it's like, for some reason, they just do better on higher carb and lower fat. And right now, like in the community, it's like, everything's all about paleo. And so like, it's like, sounds crazy. Like, what do you mean eat higher carb and cut down the fats? And like, usually I would say no, but for some people, that's what they need.
Right. Well, and so for me personally, and for people I believe with Crohn's and a lot of inflammatory conditions, lots and lots and lots of good fats are really important. But the thing is to keep in mind, so, a traditional ketogenic diet is high fat, low carb, low protein, or they say moderated, moderated protein, low carb. But the thing is, if you're eating, and so like, if you look at that on a specific level, a lot of them would say like 25 grams of carbs or 50 grams of carbs, which is not a lot. If anybody knows, that's not a lot. However, if you're eating 4,000 to 5,000 calories a day of whatever, 200 grams of carbs is still, 4% of the diet. So that's still very, very low carb on a macro level, but you're getting your carbs that you want. You could eat a whole sweet potato then, or, more, and really enjoy that. So, you really have to look at it on a relative basis. But I think generally speaking, people need a lot of good fats.
Yeah, no, I would agree for the most, definitely. I mean, our brains are made of fat. There's no denying how important fats are in the diet. So I hope this isn't too much of an obnoxious question, but I've got to ask these kind of things because it's like the most interesting thing to me, and I think a lot of people want to know the answer. So what is like the number one thing you run into with clients that helps them optimize their life? You said Evernote was like the most powerful tool you can give someone. What's like the biggest aha moment you give people or clients that you work with where you're like, just change, start to implement this and watch, and see what kind of happens?
I just wrote a blog post about this, actually. So, you know who Hal Elrod is?
I do. He's coming on the show.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Oh, great.
Yeah.
So he tells this story about how he was telling a friend of his that his life was basically in shambles, and his life was basically in shambles. He was in debt. Was just in in the worst place possible. And he said he talked for like a half an hour to this guy, and his friend listened quietly, and then responded and said, "Are you working out every day?" And Hal was like pissed. He was like, "What? Like, are you not? Were you not like? Are you messing with me? Were you not listening to what I'm saying? My life is like blah blah blah." And he's like, "Are you exercising every day?" And he's like, "Well, no, I haven't exercised at all." So he started exercising, and he said within like 2 weeks things were really on a much better path, and now it's one of the foundations of his thing. So when I have people who tell me, and I get the same things, people tell me that I literally like just wrote this before we got on the phone, so I'll read it. When someone tells me that they have too much stress in their life, they work too much and don't get to focus on their passion projects, they have relationship problems, and they don't eat well, depending on how shocking I want to be, I'll often ask them, how many emails do you have in your inbox? And I get a similar reaction. People are like, who cares about email? What are you talking about? I just told you all this stuff. Like, my wife is all this.
Yeah.
Email and being good at email is such an important thing. So unless you're going to be someone like John Paul DeJorio, who owns Paul Mitchell, and he's like a multi-billionaire, and doesn't do email at all, if you do email, you need to do it well. It's a skill, it's as important, and it does a number of things. First of all, it gives you that little sense of control. Because what people don't seem to remember, your email, your cell phone, your pager, if you still have one, your fax, your IM, all that stuff, those are your tools to communicate with your world. They are not supposed to be leashes for the outside world to get a hold of you and control you whenever they want. So first of all, look at it that way. Second of all, realize that email is the most wonderful and greatest productivity tool that has ever existed, because what other medium can you carry on thousands of conversations at the same time, remember all of it because you can search for anything you want, and trade visual materials, translate things to other languages? All of that can be done from this one little interface that's free. So please try to convince me that that's not a good tool for you to be more productive. And the thing is if you have a clean inbox, and you go with inbox zero, which there's a whole other conversation we have about that, how to do that, but you get in a mode where, first of all, you're constantly in action. You're constantly creating actions, right? So my basic concept for dealing with email is the 3 Ds. You either deal with it right now because you can, which could include delegating it. You delete it because it's not relevant or no longer useful or it's spam or whatever. Or you defer it to a time that would be better for you to actually deal with it, which is not procrastinating. This is actually saying, I can more effectively deal with this at this time. So if you do that, you get that sense of control. And it's a launch pad for all the other skills that I teach. Because, for instance, if somebody says, I get this email from this person all the time, I wish that I could, create a new project every time that does. Well, there's a website called IFTTT that does that. My wife just emailed me and she's running late, so I need to tell the dog person, whatever, I need to tell the dog sitter to come by. oh, well, I can have a virtual assistant like Fancy Hands go ahead and do that for me. You know, oh, this person is telling me that they need me to update this logo. I don't know how to do graphic design. Oh, good. Well, there's a website called Fiverr.com where you can hire someone for $5 to fix those things for you. So email becomes that launch pad to being more productive, to getting more done, to feeling the pride that you've gotten to inbox zero and staying that way. And it keeps you in problem-solving mode. Because if you know that there's all these different outlets that you can do with these things, and there's a method here, and you get in that mode where you're like a sniper, then nothing's a problem. Nothing is an emergency because even if you don't have the solution right now, you know that you're going to find one.
Yeah.
How many emails do you have in your inbox?
I've got let's see here. I think I have one, man.
All right.
I've got two now. I've got two since now we got one. Wasn't important. Doing okay.
That's awesome.
That's awesome, man. All right. Well, that's an awesome tool. I know you gotta get out of here and get on to your next interview. But thank you so much for coming on, dude. This is so powerful. I got a ton of notes here just for myself that I'm going to start implementing. And I think my listeners got a lot of great stuff too. So thank you, man.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
All right.